So going into my third year, I chose to do my dissertation on AI and the right to be forgotten. So I was essentially looking at when we're using machine learning algorithms, because machine learning is a subset of AI, um, can we actually erase someone's data? So are all these companies really protecting your data? Can they actually erase it um, to the extent that's kind of guaranteed by law? And that is when I kind of started looking around more at the legal tech world. And I came across Legal Geek, which is the legal tech equivalent of Legal Cheat. And that's when I saw an article about someone who had done a law degree and gone on to do a master's in computer science, so computer science conversion. And up until that point, I didn't even know computer science conversions even existed. And so I looked at it more and I thought like this would be a really good opportunity, mainly because I get really frustrated not understanding something. And I didn't really get machine learning except for from a theoretical point of view. So I kind of wanted to be able to learn to actually code and get like my hands dirty with it essentially. So I just finished that this past September actually. And I did my my thesis on creating an automatic case summarization system. So that was actually using machine learning, putting it into practice, which is really exciting. We actually just found out today, my supervisor and I, that we're going to be published in an upcoming conference publication. So that's on the work that I did in my thesis, which is really exciting. And then I'm also the co-founder of Open Tenancy with my friend. And basically it's going to be an open source website, which we're currently open for contributions. But it'll be an open source website that ideally students can go to. And they click one button and they'll be guided through an interview that can help them understand their tenancy rights a bit better. And the reason we kind of started that was essentially, I found that looking at what was available online, articles that were around could be really confusing. And that's even coming from me, who's a law student. And so all I could think was, wow, I wonder if other people are really not enforcing their tenancy rights. So I brought it up with Anna and we're now working on that project. And then the final bit is I'm currently interning at Avoca, and this is actually I think my 4th week there. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, awesome. I mean, you've covered it a little bit, but would you like be able to tell us a bit like why did you decide to pursue your conversion computer science and why legal technology? Like why from a law degree you decided to get into you know, computer science, all things tech?
Yeah, so I think it just kind of started in like I said, I was frustrated that I didn't really understand it. And I didn't do it because I don't think you're going to need to code to be a lawyer. I don't think that's a skill you're going to need. When I was going into doing the computer science conversion, I was still kind of going back and forth between if I wanted to be a lawyer. But then I kind of started to see, like looking at something like Legal Geek, all these different companies that were out there, like legal tech startups and like more established legal tech companies. And all I could think was, well, you know, those are actual genuine career opportunities. So let me see if I really enjoy coding, which the work I'm doing now isn't coding. And I don't think I would be happy coding. I wanted to find something that was in the middle, which I think I have done at Avoca. But definitely just to get more hands-on experience and to understand what you can do with code. So I wanted to learn how to code essentially.
Okay, and so I mean, you've just started working as at legal tech startup, right?
Yeah.
Is it your first experience in the field, like working experience?
Yeah, this is my first experience. Yeah.
Would you be able to spare like a couple of words on what's like a typical day like? What sort of work you work on? Do you work with law firms? How much law related work do you have? Is it all coding? How is it like?
Yeah, so I actually don't do any coding. So we have the developers who work on the platform separately, and I'm with the team. Well, they're based in London, but I'm in Canada at the minute. We also have a team in Singapore. And so I've been doing recently a lot of social media. So I've been getting like our Instagram account running, stuff like that. I've done a bit of automation. So sometimes our clients ask us to automate the documents for them. So I've done a bit of that. Sales, going out and trying to find clients, and hopefully soon I'll be doing demos of the platform as well. So it's kind of like a lot of everything. And I think that also comes from being in a startup environment. I mean, from the first day I was doing documentation and writing up notes to send to clients. And that was just goes to show you how awesome like working in a startup is and the kind of responsibility that you get.
No, definitely. And I mean, having worked for a bit in the sector, in the environment, do you think it's true with that the legal sector is in need of this? Because, I mean, as I said in my introduction, one of the things that how the legal sector is being criticized at the moment is not only their like lack of innovation, but the fact that clients expect quicker results, they want more flexible prices. So how do you think not only startups but legal tech in general can help? Do you have any like concrete examples of how legal technology can actually help the traditional model of a law firm?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about it from, for those who don't know, Avoca is a document automation platform. So I can kind of talk about what we do. So typically, if you want to go through and, make a contract, make a document, anything like that, you're going to have to go through and erase the square brackets and then type in the data each time for each different document or contract that you want to make. Whereas with Avoca, what we do is we have a template of the document. So if you have one standard like employment contract, you would make a clause or a condition, and then we use that, and as well as attributes. So like the attribute essentially is you're looking at, if we're looking at an employment contract, the attribute could be someone's position, so what role they're actually being hired for. We use that data to then make it into a questionnaire. So now when you're creating your document, you answer the questionnaire and then it'll just fill in the fields for you. And what's really cool, I think there's a lot of document automation companies out there. And I think that was kind of a couple of years ago, a lot of legal tech startups kind of started popping up everywhere. But I think what's cool about Avoca especially is we're able to handle like complex documents, linking documents. And so really what legal tech's doing for law firms is that we're just making their lives more simple, we're saving them time, and it's just more efficient. And like you said, I think a lot of clients are expecting efficiency, particularly because lawyers work with a billable hour. So if you're wasting a bunch of hours doing something that you could be doing a lot faster, a lot of clients now realize that this is a possibility and expect it to be done.
And do you think, I mean, this could be like maybe not an easy question, but do you think that this model might take over the classic model of a law firm? A question I got a lot through our Instagram account was, do you think that the role of lawyers will be replaced going forward? I don't know if you have an opinion about this at the moment.
I don't think so. I don't think it'll be anytime soon in the next 10, 20 years. I'm happy to be proven wrong. But I think to have technology replacing a lawyer, they've got to be able to reason opinions in the same way that lawyers do. And that's a massive part of the job. So I think what really successful legal tech companies look at is basic inefficiencies and the things that really could be automated or could be done by a machine. And there's a lot of amazing companies out there doing like focusing on quite niche areas, but I think the actual reasoning that happens from an actual lawyer, I really don't see technology replacing that. Like if you saw recently the GPT-3, it was a massive AI development, but there's like a lot of flaws in it. So it could write really wonderful articles. So it was like a computer could automatically write them, which is really, really cool. And it's a massive advancement, but it just couldn't reason its way through an argument in the same way. So there's definitely a way to go before we even see that. But I really think the lawyer's role might change, but they'll always already in it. They have the final say, and they've kind of got to watch its path and watch over it.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. However, I mean, do you have any like specific examples of how law firms use it apart from like what Avoca as a startup is doing for like automation, for example? I know that, for example, Magic Circle firms have their like tech hub where that develop their technologies. I don't know if you have any insight into that, what they do, how they do it, and also how would you get into it? Like, do you think that just studying law and that getting into legal technology might be enough? Do you need some qualifications? For example, do you need a degree in computer science? Do you need to learn how to program to get into it, or is just a passion into technology enough to get into the field?
Yeah, I think it honestly just depends what you want to work at or what you want to work as. If you want to be a developer, even if you wanted to be a software engineer or a developer, you don't need a degree in computer science. A lot of amazing software engineers are self-taught. So I don't think a degree in computer science is in any way necessary. But if we're looking at a lot of these innovations, and like you said, even the team at Avaca, I'm the only one, I think, with a computer science degree that works on the sales side and actually working on automating documents. And I think a real value of people who've done a law degree or who are lawyers or et cetera that are looking at getting into legal tech is that I think you'll be successful at computer science or even coding, because you are able to reason your way through in a way that a machine does. So when we're automating documents, you're basically looking at, if this happens, then do this, if not, do this. So it's a lot of just like reasoning your way through. And I think that's why lawyers can be really successful in the legal tech field. But obviously, it just depends on the person as well and what you want to do.
Do you think it will be a necessity going forward? Do law students need to be familiar with this now? Do you think it will have to go hand in hand, or is it a bit too early?
I think you'll definitely have to be aware of the technologies that are out there and the different legal tech startups and companies. I say startups because a lot of legal tech is startups, but then you definitely have the big names out there. But I think just being aware of what's possible, being aware of what you should be looking for in a law firm, and what, even when you start your role, moving on, what you might want to have implemented and but I don't think you're not going to need to know how to code, because most of the platforms out there and most of the startups and companies are moving towards a no code basis where you're not actually writing code. You're going to have to understand the conditional logic, like I just said. So, only do this if I say this, if this, then that. But that's much easier than having to figure out like the actual syntax of the coding and how to make it work.
Yeah. And go to questions. So I mean, we can start like answering the questions whenever we get them in the box chat. So Gemma asks, she has a question about blockchain. So she said, I understand Ethereum is being used to make smart contracts using blockchain technology. With the public interest of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, when do you think something like smart contracts using blockchain would be a staple in all law firms and the requirement for lawyers to work with?
That's a really interesting question. I won't say that I have firsthand experience with blockchain or smart contracts. I've looked into both, and there is some really interesting work being done for smart contracts. But it's one of those things that, I actually had a chat with our co-founder Elliot at one point when I was interviewing for Avaca, where it was like we couldn't really think of a substantial use case for smart contracts, in that they're not necessarily a necessity at the minute. But I do think, give it 10 or 20 years, that could be something that is just commonplace in a law firm, which is definitely interesting. But right now, I think a lot of them are the more basic technologies that have been successful.
Okay. Jasmine asks, do you think, going back to another topic, is it worth doing legal tech or just gaining industry experience? I mean, you have answered this already, but
yeah, I think it really just depends. Did she say legal tech? Yeah, so there's a lot of really, really cool courses out there now that I was looking at. I think Queen Mary does one on legal tech. It depends your interest in the topic. I really don't think you need it if you're interested in working in a legal tech environment, or even, going and being a solicitor. It's not something that you need. I think it is just awareness of the technologies that are out there, like I keep mentioning, Legal Geek is a really, really good tool and website that has amazing articles. There's a startup map, so you can kind of get a feel of all the different areas that legal tech kind of exists in and all the things that it's used for. So that's an amazing option as well. But it depends. If you're interested in it from an academic point of view, or just learning, then it's really amazing, and it won't hurt you by any means. But by no means is it really a necessity.
I remember that before opening the session, we were talking about how Avoca does this academy. Are you talk a bit about that too? Because I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, of course.
Technology.
And yeah, so the academies are a really, really great tool. And I think this is something as well that I've seen a lot. And I think I did as well. Talking about legal technology, you talk about it without really understanding it and really understanding how it's used. So Avoca runs the Avoca Academy, which please do feel free to come along to. It's on, I believe it's avoca.academy.com, but if you Google it, you'll see it. And they're essentially 1.5 hour long Zoom sessions where you're able to actually play around with our platform and learn about conditional logic a little bit and get a hands-on experience automating the documents. And I think that's a really, really amazing opportunity to get firsthand experience with the tool. So definitely have a look at those. I think we're running one in the next week or so, but we're constantly running them. So do have a look.
Okay, thank you. And what about, you mentioned before the open tenancy.
Yep.
It's something that you founded, right? It's a bit of a company you created, if I'm not mistaken.
You know, did that cut out?
Yeah, no, I can hear now.
No, open source, for those who aren't familiar, you're essentially, it's free for all to contribute, and it's free for you to just use and work with. And so what we're doing is making an open source website. So right now we're kind of, there's not, that I'm aware of, really open source in the legal market, because everyone's really, really closed off about, you know, the law and the money they make, et cetera, like holding on to that. But we want to make it more widely available. So we think for a lot of students, you can't really afford, you know, to get a lawyer or to properly enforce tenancy rights, which you're fully entitled to. So what we're doing is looking for contributors now. So all our social medias are open tenancy. I think we're open tenancy _ on Twitter. And if you have a look, we have it on GitHub. You're able to basically just write out decision trees on tenancy rights. So you'd ask a question, if they answer this, then you ask a different question, or else you just keep going. And we're really just keen on getting contributors to write those up so that we have some friends that will code it and then put it into actual live interviews on our website. And then eventually going down the road, we'll keep opening it up, probably open it up for coding contributions as well. So
yeah, one of the things I'm really fascinated about the technology and coding and data world is how everything is open source, so that everyone can contribute, which I found really interesting. And it's not something that happens a lot in other industries, right? Where you can have this for free, people just contributing to your project.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about. We really want to just share. And I think myself, especially, you know, having a law degree and now computer science, I've got a unique skill set, so I may as well like put it to the best cause possible. And I think that this really is a good cause, mainly because I'm sure you've experienced it as well, being a law student, all your friends that come to you like, can I get tenancy advice? So we think this is a really, really good alternative, basically.
Do you think that your law degree helped, or I mean, both ways, do you think that your law degree helped you in your computer science master's, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just being able to logically work through problems step by step. Like, you know, we had the massive problem questions, so you'd sit down and properly work through it. I think that coding is the same. You face a problem, you have to say, okay, what's the first step? And then you keep working through each of the different steps to get to the solution. And it's not only the first solution, it's the best solution, which I think is quite similar to the law. So it's that kind of mentality that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, quite nicely together.
Yeah.
And we got a question about how, if you have any examples of how legal tech can be implemented in specific practice areas. So I'm assuming of a law firm.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're talking about, I keep going back to document automation because it's what I'm most familiar with, but document automation can kind of be used across practice areas. If you're looking at, like, you can do stuff like NDAs, employment contracts, and it just kind of expands from there. Other companies out there, like there's Office and Dragons, they're looking at transaction development. So they're looking at the ones doing the big deals, which is really cool. So you're essentially, and what's cool about Avoca as well, and a lot of other tools now are kind of coming up with this, is negotiating on the platform. So we're essentially the Google Docs for law. So you put your document on, and then your counterparty can come on and negotiate on the platform rather than having to email Word documents back and forth and deal with the, two different versions. So it's kind of like just making it more efficient and working with the little boring tasks each day. And there's a lot of like different areas out there that are really just focused on fixing these small problems.
And what about, apart from automation, I was reading something the other day about, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the role of analytics, especially in like litigation analytics. Do you have any insights on it? Like on civil analytics on federal judges and federal courts.
In terms of how it's used, or? Yeah, so I'm not that familiar with it. I can see definitely the benefits of it for, like you said, working in court, seeing how it goes. But I'm not that familiar with actual use cases. And I think right now I'd be interested in seeing kind of the uptake of it, because I think a lot of firms now with COVID, budgets are shrinking, so they're looking to save money as much as possible. So that's really interesting area.
How would you sell your unique skill set when applying for training contracts, etc.? I think, I don't know, maybe we can tie up to this. Would you ever consider like pursuing a training contract, so becoming a lawyer, or do you see yourself more working in legal tech for now?
So I definitely did consider applying for training contracts, but I think about a year ago, midway through my master's, I decided that wasn't the route for me. I definitely think it would be a really, really good skill set like my own, to apply for training contracts. Like I said, being able to reason through arguments, which is something that I think computer science really aids. Problem solving skills, absolutely. Like you're kind of building on that skill set, and critical thinking as well. Sometimes you get the most ridiculous bugs and you kind of have to work your way back. And I really think that's a good way you can apply it to actual problems. Myself personally, I really think legal tech's the area for me. I have done some interning at law firms before, and I think I just prefer, especially being in a startup, you're still kind of getting a say in everything that's going on. So you're able to actually put your voice into what you're doing. Whereas when I was working, and maybe it's just because, I love technology. I've never coded before starting my master's, but I have always kind of loved technology, which I'm sure a lot of like younger people do. But when I did some interning, it really frustrated me, the old way of doing things, like just going through a Word document and, combine and replace certain terms. I think that is commonplace. I can't say I'm familiar with all firms, especially now. Like you said, there's a lot of innovation hubs and a lot of them are implementing these technologies, but definitely like having a voice.
Many law firms, for example, I know about Clifford Chance, are actually starting training contracts focused on technology. So they run it, on the side of the normal training contract. They actually just recruit trainees to work on legal technology.
Yes, the Ignite training contract, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Ignite it's called, exactly. So that's what shows how much they're shifting into the the sector, which is kind of fascinating, I think.
Yeah.
Jem asks, she says document automations seems really fascinating. Would document automations also potentially help companies comply with GDPR?
That's really interesting. I don't know. In terms of,
Sorry, I think we lost you there.
Oh, I just meant in what sense, like for complying with the GDPR? Do you mean complying with the actual regulations?
Yeah, I believe that's what she meant.
Um, I'm not too sure on that one. I'd have to think about that more. Um, yeah, I'm not too sure. Not gonna lie.
And we got another one. Any challenges that law firms face when implementing legal tech, which could be interesting, especially for
Um,
also thinking because I see not all, I mean, not about just legal technology, but the fact that many people are digitalizing all their cases, for example, everything definitely poses some threats to law firms, especially because the documents that law firms handle are very sensitive at times because confidentiality with the client and so on.
yeah, that's absolutely. And I think because we're a cloud-based platform, which I think a lot of companies now are, and so that's something we see a lot is if it's on the cloud, how is this secure? How is this safe? Um, but I think one of the biggest issues is the lack of enthusiasm from a lot of law firms about legal tech because a lot of them are, older partners. Um, and I think like they're not that keen necessarily on having a young person, especially because a lot of people who are working particularly in legal tech are quite young. So they're not that keen on having like a younger person come in and tell them the way you've always done things are wrong.
Do you think that's
So
a trend in just the law firms in general that they're, I mean, I see them in the latest year, they're really trying to push towards legal technology, but I think they're like the industry which is less reliant on technology, probably.
yeah, and I think that's something you have to watch out for as well. Like if you're looking at applying for training contracts, um, if you're interested in legal technology, make sure that you're also asking the questions back. What technologies are they using? Because I think there is a common practice that a lot of it is for press releases. So, firms that are using AI and they're all about pushing out and being like, look, we're using AI now, but you could go and ask them, what are you actually using it for? And I don't think a lot of them really have proper use cases that they put it towards. They just bought the tool and kind of let it sit there. But definitely, if you're interested in legal tech, make sure you're asking those questions as well, because it's an interview for them too.
And going back to the challenges, that the fact that you do everything in the cloud, I don't think you, yeah, if we could just go back to it, like,
Yeah,
first of all, if it's secure, and
yeah,
also other challenges that law firms might face if they implement technology, like partly.
yeah. So I think the cloud is absolutely secure. It's oftentimes more secure than storing it on your own computer. Uh, just in terms of the security levels, it depends obviously on the company, but like most of them encrypt the data, so it's really hard for it to be hacked. That really just depends on the company. I think the cloud is ethical. Like no one really understands the cloud, but it's essentially just a bunch of different servers. They all kind of connect and bounce around between each other, and so that's the cloud really. So it is definitely secure.
Okay. And what about any other threats do you think that the implement of knowledge, like a really hard implement of technology, would that be a threat to the law firm in general?
Sorry, I missed the last part of the question.
Yeah, no, in just not talking about the cloud or any like documents that might be digitalized. Do you think that law firms might face any other challenges when implementing legal technology?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that they try to do too much too fast on implementing legal technology, and then that can really put a bad taste in your mouth when it doesn't go well. So you kind of like, for a lot of firms, they have to look internally, see where the best kind of areas are for them to implement, and start small. If you missed Legal Geek yesterday, Catherine Bamford did a really interesting talk on why legal tech projects fail. And that's one of the key things she said as well, is you're just trying to, write all of your documents at once, but it's really good to start small. or implementing AI. I think that's a really, really big ask that takes a while. And the other thing as well is not necessarily document automation, but others especially, they can take a while to implement. It's not an overnight solution. So that's a big thing too, is people get put off by the amount of time required.
But I know this is a very broad question, but what does it actually mean when a law firm says we're implementing AI? Is it just about automation of some like document automation, for example, or?
Yeah, document automation isn't AI. So AI would be like, so I'm most familiar with machine learning. Like I said, I only started coding a year ago, so I won't claim to know everything. I'm most familiar with machine learning because I did work with it. But machine learning is essentially just statistics. So you're using it to predict something. That can be applied in a lot of different ways. Like I did it with summarizing case judgments. So I used it to predict how relevant a sentence was in a judgment. And then we took those sentences out to make a summary. So in law firms, it could probably be used for similar respects. There's some law firms I know who have natural language processing teams. So they're looking at working with machine learning on their own internal data sets of contracts. So you can use that maybe to describe or to maybe guess if a clause is going to or legally correct, if that makes sense. So yeah, so you can use it to look at previous clauses and then kind of predict which should go in and stuff like that.
Do you think that they would rely on the results? Because of course, like it's just a prediction. Do you think that it would be valuable to a law firm in that sense? Would like even clients, would they rely on it? Or would it be just like an aid and not like a tool to actually assist on it?
I think it should be an aid and not a tool, but I think a lot of them would probably treat it as a tool. So it depends on the algorithm because you're able to see how accurate it is. So maybe having that knowledge, like a lot of the sentences that we included in like my summary for my thesis, it only predicted that it was 44% relevant, which is very high. But then that was included because you need a lot of training data. So I know like some firms, they are keeping it quite internal. So it will be interesting to see how that goes. I don't think it's a priority for a lot of firms right now implementing AI, just because of COVID and budget hits and stuff like that. They're probably looking for the fastest way to save money.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, technology is said to be saving money most of the times.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not really. Okay, I'm just gonna go to Gemma's question first and then go back to your degree one because it's more relevant to the work. Because she asks if you could describe a typical day working in a legal tech startup.
I don't know if there's a typical day. If I were in London, we'd start the day with a meeting, but those happen at 4 a.m. my time, so they've kindly told me I don't have to hop on for those. Like my day to day, basically did a bit of social media posts to get up for the weekend, so I pre-scheduled those. I'm also doing a bit with one of our clients. They have an error with one of their contracts, so I've been asked to look into that and figure out why that's happening, and if we can't fix it, we'll send it back to the developers to actually code and fix. We also had a sales meeting to decide how well our sales strategy worked this past week, and at the same time we're also doing training on the platform right now so that we can kind of understand every aspect of it. And then I was also just basically going through my outstanding tasks. So I've been asked to actually code a really exciting project, which I can't really talk that much about, but I can actually put my degree to use with coding something, and it's doing proof of concept with one of our integration partners, which is really exciting. So it's all of everything, really.
No, definitely. And you said, so what Avoca does is basically you get law firms as your clients and you help them with the tools you develop, right?
Yeah, so we work with law firms, in-house teams, but also commercial teams, because like one particular area that's kind of universal is like HR. I think that's somewhere that I've been looking at recently as well. So human resources teams can absolutely benefit from what we do, but definitely a lot of in-house teams. And so what we do is we normally do a pilot scheme first. They try out to see if they like it, and then we can roll it out for them across. So we start with like a small group of documents and then roll it out. And so they can decide whether they want to automate their own documents. So that means creating an actual template that you can then create the questionnaire off of, or we'll do it for them. And yeah, we'll do training and stuff for them, and then let them, after so many months, basically have full reign over it most of the time.
Okay. And you got asked which of your degrees has been more useful for legal tech work, which I feel we have answered a bit, but if you want to take another.
Yeah, I don't know. I think honestly both together have been really, really useful. I think the computer science degree basically reinforced the skills that I had learned during my law degree. So like I said, problem solving, critical thinking, which I do think has become quite useful, especially with automation. So being able to problem solve, and again, just thinking like conditionality and stuff like that. So that's been really quite useful. And obviously I have done a bit of coding, and I think I'm better, I think, or okay at automating now than I probably would have been coming straight out of my law degree, because I've done computer science, so I understand how it all works a bit more. But again, I don't think it's necessary, but it's definitely been a help.
Definitely. And I do have a question, because you mentioned that you also work with some human resources and stuff. So regards to the legal sector, do you think, like thinking about all the kinds of technology that might assist the legal sector, what do you think the legal sector, what technology do you think the legal sector should implement, which they haven't done already? What do you think is urgent? What other like sector has implemented that the legal sector is still lacking, that it could assist them in delivering, you know, more efficiently to the clients with better prices, quicker?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I really can't think of any really, but I think if we're talking about the existing tools in the legal tech market, you have to remember not every law firm's implemented these, not every company's implemented these. A lot of the big names, yes, but a lot of them also are using some tools that, you know, were developed 20 years ago that aren't really, you know, that require coding or are difficult to kind of get your head around. So I think that the legal world or the legal market still has quite a way to go in terms of actually implementing tools like that. So I really think starting at basics with something like automation is really important.
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second.
Okay.
All right. I mean, I think we've covered a bit. We can wait and see if we get any other questions. I did get another in top of my head, which was, I mean, the business world as it is forcing the legal sector to adopt some new technologies, either willingly or not willingly. Do you think that the adoption of legal tech is changing the law firm model in a way from how it was, say, 10 years ago? Do you think it had some influence, not only like delivering quicker? Do you think it changed the way it works, or it is changing the way it is working?
I think right now, because we're looking at tools that are kind of enhancing the way that they currently work rather than completely overhauling it, I don't think it's really changed that much. I'm not that familiar with how it used to be because, like I said, I went straight into legal tech. But I do think that we're looking at the legal market is basically implementing, you know, automation, stuff like that, that a lot of other areas have looked at previously. And they're kind of like, law firms are late to the game in a lot of respects. So I think give it 10 years, 20 years when AI can actually really kind of have a substantial impact, then it would probably be changed. I think right now, machine learning can absolutely be implemented for little bits like scanning documents and seeing if clauses are in there, should they be in there, stuff like that. But like you said, it's more of a aid rather than a completely over, like a tool that completely takes over everything. So I think right now it's not rapidly changing, rather than maybe giving them a bit more time to do more exciting work. But
do you think we will get to a point where it will take over, or not really? Do you think it will remain an aid?
I think the way that we are, like the way that AI is kind of developing right now, there's no algorithm that's 100% perfect. So I think you're always going to need someone there looking over it. Like I said, I think like the lawyer should still, you kind of need that human reasoning, because machine learning, AI, it's for the most part just statistics. So if you have a case pops up that have never happened before, well, it's going to go to the best of its ability to figure out and take a guess. Basically, it's a stab in the dark. So I think having someone there to look over it is absolutely beneficial.
We got a question. What do you think legal tech companies could do better when they're approaching regular firms with their services as opposed to law firms?
I think marketing yourself as a legal tech company is absolutely correct, but I wonder if a lot of regular firms think that the legal tech market is just for law firms. So I think it's opening yourself up to the other markets and showing exactly what you can do, and showing as well where the inefficiencies are, because like that's a really important point. Like I said before, legal tech products are not just for law firms. I think there's a lot of products out there that are just for law firms, but something like automation can absolutely be applied to other companies. And I think the important thing is just figuring out where their inefficiencies are. So a lot of legal tech startups are founded by former lawyers, so I think they kind of understand the inefficiencies quite well for law firms, but not necessarily how other businesses operate, because it can vary from business to business. So it's starting off and figuring out what their pain points are, and then being like, well, this is how we can change that and how we can fix that and make it better. So
Definitely. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. That was really interesting. I'll wait a bit to see if we get any other questions with regards to that. If anyone is interested in the latest development in both the law sector, legal sector, and the technology, I've read a really interesting book a couple of months ago called Future Lawyers by Richard Susskind, which is all about not just automation, but about even online courts, just about the technological revolution and how it will go in 10 years, 20 years time, which is many speculations, but it also provides many good points to think about if you're interested in legal technology, if you're getting onto an interview and you feel like you want to talk about it. But as you said, also be wary of the fact that many law firms are still like with their feet on the ground and not wanting the way they have been operating for many years. But it's definitely interesting to think about it, and just to think about how the situation will evolve, or to think
one interesting point that I can kind of throw in there, outside of law firms, I think technology has a massive way to change the way like current access to justice organizations work. And I think that might be the start of a lot of, like we're doing with open tenancy.
Mm-hmm.
I think technology is kind of the easiest solution to not have to pay lawyers to do stuff like that. And you've seen, there's a few examples, I can't think of the name off the top of my head, of this happening in the States, where they now have online AI courts, essentially. There's Do Not Pay, which is a really, really cool app where it basically fights your parking ticket for you. And so I think technology at its starting point, when you're looking at if it's going to take over law firms, maybe not now because their clients already pay a lot of money, but people who can't afford it, it's absolutely a benefit. And I think they're basically going to be the testing market for a lot of these tools, which will be really interesting to see.
No, this is a very interesting point. I remember seeing something like this on the internet, even providing like small packages of services for people at very affordable prices. And I also think that even if maybe law firms will not implement all the technologies there is in the world, that this will maybe influence the way that they're working and become maybe more accessible, who knows, in the future, because of this technological revolution we're experiencing, which is also something really interesting to think about. You're correct. And we got another last question. Would you be able to talk about big data technologies and how it affects law firms and companies? Which I believe is a bit broad.
Yeah, I think that is not my area of expertise. I'm not gonna lie.
If you could be a bit more specific into what you want to know about big data technologies exactly, so we can be a bit more of assistance. But anyways, as to conclude a bit, and if we think about last questions, did you read anything that like sparked your interest to get into the legal tech sector, or was it just an interest you matured over time? Do you have any like reading recommendations for people that want to get into it a bit more, but they're not like so sure as to commit to do a master's or do an internship, for example?
Yeah, I'd absolutely recommend, like I said before, Legal Geek does a lot of like amazing articles with some really cool use cases. So if you're interested in actually seeing how technology is applied, stuff like that, absolutely have a look at that, like brief articles. There's tons of there's like the Legal Technologist. They do really cool articles and interviews with different people in the legal sector about this kind of topic. So I'd recommend having a read of some of their editions. Definitely just read around it. Try and figure out, especially if you're going for training contract interviews, try and think about actual use cases. Technology, like don't think of it as this, obscure, far away thing that's untouchable. It's absolutely something that you can, get your hands on. And like we mentioned earlier, with some like the Avoca academies, try and play around with tools. There's a few other, I can't think of them off the top of my head again, organizations out there as well who do similar academy type things. So try and actually get firsthand experience.
Yeah, as everything. You got a question as to why you studied law in the UK as opposed to Canada?
Canada, it takes 7 years to get your law degree. You have to do a 4-year bachelor's first, and then you do your law degree. And I knew well, at that time, I thought I wanted to do law. And so I decided to go straight to the UK to do it because Canada is also common law. So I could bring it back if I wanted to, but then kind of change of plans by falling in love with legal tech. So
No, you got me there. I'm originally from Italy, and in Italy you also take like 7-8 years to qualify, and there's like
yeah,
a exam at the end. In the UK, in this sense, is a lot more accessible because you can also do a law conversion course and do it quite quickly. They focus a lot more on the practical aspect rather than the studying, which has its pros and cons. But I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
okay. Well, if that is all the questions we're gonna get, I think we can also call it a session. It's definitely been really interesting and really informative. So thank you so much for accepting my invite in this Q&A. I hope people found it useful. I definitely have
Absolutely.
learned many things I didn't know. I have recorded the session, so we do have our own website, and we are developing a section where we're gonna post all the past Q&As we have held over the past few months. So we're gonna find this session there too. And so yes, if you don't have any other additional questions or you don't have any other additional infos to give us, we can call it a session. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for enjoying.
And just quickly, you feel free to reach out to me anytime on social media as well. I'm Amy Conroy there. So if you have any questions or follow-ups or any questions about open tenancy too, then do reach out.
Perfect. Thank you so much again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.